Ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to you all. Welcome to the webinar Symposium with Ansel Wong. The first speaker of today is Simran. Over to you, Simran.
Perfect. Thank you, Agatha. Massive hello to everybody and thank you all for joining us today. I'm Simran Soom. I'm a customer experience designer at Atos and events lead for our cultural diversity network, Together Network. We're so excited to be sharing a collaboration with you today between ourselves at Atos and Network Rail. With this in mind, I would love to pass over to Fatima Baig, who will be my co-host today.
Thank you for that, Simran. I'm Fatima. Hi, everyone. I am also Simran is doing the Atos bit and I'm doing the Network Rail bit. So we've got two presenters today. So I am the financial controller for the finance strategy and development team within Group Finance and Network Rail. And as part of Cultural Fusion Network, I am also the head of external relations. So our Culture Fusion Network is our Black, Asian and minority ethnic employees and allies network. And this is our first collaborative event for Black History Month with Atos. And we are very excited to have Ansel with us, who has recently been awarded the CBE. So without further ado, I am going to pass on to Ansel. Ansel, if you can do a brief introduction of yourself. And congratulations.
Thank you and good afternoon to everyone. I think with a name like Ansel Wong, I don't know what you were expecting to see, but what you are seeing in front of you is very much a Trinidadian. I'm a product of a multiplicity of heritages and ethnicities. My father comes directly from Guangdong in China. My mother is a mixture of African, indigenous, Carib, and Spanish. So folks, that's me, educated as a British colonial with tertiary education in the United Kingdom. And I arrived here as part of the British Airways generation in 1965. Unfortunately, I missed the Windrush. I came here to study university and now here today at the age of 75, I'm very delighted to share with you my thoughts.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ansel. Very humble introduction from yourself. Can't wait to get stuck into some discussions with you all today. Just before we do get stuck into some really thought-provoking discussions, we'd love to run through a bit of the tech that we'll be using. We have dropped in a Miro board link into the chat. So if you can all copy and paste that into your Google Chrome, we'd love to invite you into board that we're using. That will help us with our discussions. And whilst we're all getting into that, I'll just go through the aims of the session today. So it's a conversation around the evolution of the Black experience, and there are a few points that we really wanted to touch on today. Firstly, the role of education, then the role of workplaces, and throughout this we'll be discussing the role of individuals as well. Like Agatha mentioned at the beginning, just to reiterate, we are recording this session today, so if you do wish to remain anonymous, please do not put your camera on and don't share your name on the call, as we will be sharing the recording outside of this. So in terms of a few guidelines for how we're looking to run the session, so this is a safe space, so we really want to respect all of the individuals a part of this session today, and respect the objectives of the sessions too. There's freedom to call out if the session isn't working or if any of the tech isn't working, for example, whether it be through the chat box or on the Miro board as well. Just to reiterate, there is a Miro board link. I'll just drop it in the chat for everybody to see as well. As I can't see many people joining just yet. So I'll just pop that in. Agatha, can you please drop that in again for us, just so everybody can access it? Thank you so much. So just in terms of how the Miro board works as well, just before everybody logs in. So it's just essentially zooming in and zooming out. You can use your trackpad. You can all see me doing that at the moment as well. I have pre-populated post-it notes for everybody to use on the board. So you can use this, and I'll just do a demo for you now as well. So if you click on a post-it note, as I'm doing here, as is highlighted, and you drag it across onto the board, just like you would resize on any other document, you just click and drag, double click to type. As you can see, I'm doing just now. Perfect. So I see a few of you starting to join me on the board at the moment, which is really good. We don't have many people on there just now. Agatha, can we just drop the link in as well, please? Just again. if that's okay.
And
Yes,
also
of
for
course.
those of you using Internet Explorer versus Chrome, it works better in Chrome actually. So it might be worth opening up Google Chrome to do it. But it works in Internet Explorer as well, though.
So please, dear
Perfect. Thank
audience,
you.
kindly see the link in the chat of your dashboard and click on it to activate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agatha. So I can see people starting to join the board. So I think it's a good place to get started into our first discussion, which is where did you learn about Black history in school? Which is a really big question. So what we wanted to do, just to get everybody used to the board and getting involved, we've dropped in a few images of figures that you might recognise. And what we wanted to do was have you all vote on whether you've seen them or not. And to do that, as you can see me doing, I'm just zooming in and we've got some post-it notes with emojis. So if you can click on I do for if you do recognise that individual and I don't for if you don't. And whilst we're all doing that and just dropping in some ideas, I'd love to open the floor to Ansel to give his thoughts on education and Black history.
I think while you're trying to do that and identify the individuals you're seeing on your board, just a very quick overview of my personal educational journey. I think one of the things to acknowledge is, as I said, I was born in Trinidad and Tobago, and our education system is very much a replica of your system, the British education system, 20 years back. So we are kind of 20 years behind. But the process of primary, tertiary, and secondary and tertiary education exists. And in order to get to tertiary education, you either migrated or came to the United Kingdom to join the university. Or in some instances, people went directly to the University of the West Indies, or to Canada, or to the UK, or to India, or to Russia. So those were the key portals for people wanting to get into tertiary education. I came to London and attended Hull University. And my educational journey was very much part of a typical journey, and the acknowledgement and difficulties of trying to be somebody who was educated in Trinidad, not knowing very much of my own history or any aspects of Commonwealth Black or Asian history. And I think that is one aspect that had fueled me into thinking of what I should be doing to try to remedy that. I see more and more people are coming on board, so we can begin to look at that. But one last point is that one of the things is that I arrived in 1965, as you would say, educated as a typical colonial, knowing everything about British history and British society and culture. I knew everything about Milton. I knew everything about Wordsworth. I knew everything about Blake. And you might find it a bit anal when you realize that one of the things I came here in the UK, I can quote you the annual tonnage in the coal fields of the UK each year.
Wow.
So we had to learn education and learn facts. You had to learn facts. You had to learn events. It was kind of dialogic concept of education. And you know how important that information is to my understanding and to my education is very much a difficult one. So looking at the board, how are we getting? I would expect, to be honest with you, that most of you would recognize these four individuals. So I wouldn't expect many I don't posters. Is that what we're seeing?
So I think this is in relation to the question, what did you learn about
Yes,
Black history in school as well? And what we're getting is a lot of, I didn't, I don't. I'll just have a look at the votes as well on the board for people clicking. So there's a lot of people that are saying they recognise Mira here, Mira Sayal, Stormzy,
Yes,
people definitely recognise him. Michaela, there's fewer people. And there's a fair few people recognising Gokwan as well.
Yeah. And I think the message I want to give with this is a sense that certainly of your generation and to extend my generation, you have been exposed through your education, through your media, and through your television culture to these individuals. And so I would expect everybody to have some understanding. As you know, Mira, and these individuals are important individuals in our history. Mira as a comedian and a journalist, and she was one of the 50 funniest people in the United Kingdom. And she like me, got her CBE in 2015. And you will remember her for Goodness Gracious Me. I think everybody will recognize that. Stormzy, as you know, he's a rapper. from Croydon. His parents were from Ghana, and he's an artist. And he is claimed to have had in his education 6 A stars, 3 A's, and 5 B's in his GCSE. So a very positive educational experience there for Stormzy. Michaela, and I confess, this is my kids, my children's selection, because I didn't know anything about her at all until I was introduced to her chewing gum film. And she is an actress, a singer, and a screenwriter, and she got a BAFTA for the best female actress. And Gokwan, I'm sure everybody knows him, fashion consultant, TV presenter, and importantly for me, mixed race, but he was bullied in school as a result of his mixed race because he was quite tall, he was quite fat, and he was gay. So it's important that choosing this. And in terms of our history, our exposure to education, there are 5 more images out there that I want you to have a look at and to tell me if anybody else in terms of that recognize these individuals or don't. And then I will go through each of the 4 very quickly to see their importance in terms of your education and your understanding and your awareness of these famous Black personalities. Sorry.
We've got the votes coming in now.
Yes, yes. I
Yeah,
think it's
I've got all the
important. Yes, it's important because we just want to draw a kind of a parallel in terms of what we understand. And there may well be a generational aspect. So people of my generation will be very much aware of some of that, who were rooted in the British education system. And secondly, confession and time again, there's a bias towards Trinidad and Tobago because these are some individuals that have direct links with that and to all some of my political thinking. But it's important, I think, if we have to be citizens of the UK, we need to begin an understanding of the diversity of our educational experience and an understanding of the Black presence in the United Kingdom. And I think that's what's one of the most important things that we are trying to achieve and tried to achieve in terms of the Black History Month, to acknowledge that we are talking about a presence, not a presence that's post-Windrush, but a presence that goes beyond that to other times. And I know everybody now is using this concept of Windrush and a Windrush generation, and I'm a little kind of anxious about that label that's given to me because my antecedents traveled on a boat. But never mind, we'll deal with some of that issue. So are we have got enough of individuals? And I know time is going. So let's go through very quickly the 4, starting from left to right. To the left, again confessing my Trinidadian bias. This is an important individual. Her name is Dai Aliyan. She is the mother of modern dance in China. She was born in Trinidad, and she came to the United Kingdom in 1930. And she was very instrumental, having then gone to China, where her ancestral roots were, like my father, developed interest in dance, having danced in the UK under very famous dancers. And she was very much, she was actually given a state funeral when she died, which was quite an interesting concept that not many people who were not actual Chinese, born in China, was given such an honor. But she made a significant impact. Obviously, next to her, I'm sure most people will recognize that image. I'm hoping so for folks. That's Elizabeth I. Our Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen from 1558 to 1603. And I think what's important here and why I've chosen Elizabeth I in terms of our history is that she is the queen that has noted for issuing what she has called proclamations. Proclamations, some in draft form, some not enacted. But in essence, the issues of the proclamation was the concept or the problem they were having in Elizabethan times with the presence of what was called Negroes and blackamoors, mostly around Wapping, St. Giles, and Clerkenwell. And therefore, these proclamations were aimed to get rid of this Black population in Elizabethan London. Some people say the proclamations weren't enacted, but nevertheless, I believe it's an indication of the society, an indication of the governance of the society towards the Black presence in Elizabethan time. And then next to her, I'm sure probably you would recognize him. He's a peer politician, and TV magnate, that is Lord Ali, Wahid Ali. And again, confessional time, because it is important that his mother is Trinidadian and his father is Guyanese, but also representative of the Asian presence in the Caribbean, because too often we forget that what happens in the Caribbean is not just Africa, but it's also got Asia and China. And we have a very large population of what we call Indo-Trinidadians. He is the first openly gay Muslim politician, and he was one of the 20 most influential Asians in the United Kingdom. And most importantly, he continues, even though everybody defines him as Asian, he continues to be associated with his Caribbean roots. And finally, to the extreme right, this is Sarah Forbes Bonita. And I chose her for one specific reason, because she is, for her royal connection, she was known as Amoba Ainan, and she's Nigerian, and she was captured by the slave owners, and a guy called Captain Frederick Forbes accepted her in a wardship on behalf of Queen Victoria. And the important thing for me here is that her name was Amoba Aina, but he renamed her Bonita after his ship, HMS Bonita, Shades of Windrush. And I think that's for me also important. And she was a ward of Queen Victoria. So the royal connections with Black people are very, very strong. And for me, understanding of that historical antecedents, historical background is important in part of our education.
No, most definitely. That's been really eye-opening. I know we've even planned putting this together, but I feel like every time I speak to you, Ansel, I learn so much more. This has been so brilliant. Thanks so much for everyone being active on this. I'm just going to pass over to Fatima, and we'll move into the second question that we have for everybody. Just a quick reminder as well, if you do want to join a discussion, we would love to hear your thoughts. Please do unmute your mic and raise your hand.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Simran. That was really good. And I hope you're enjoying, for those of you that are on Miro, enjoying using the post-its and typing things on. So we're moving on to the workplace board. I also want to remind everyone there is actually a board down the bottom as well, which is called What Action Will I Take? So if at any stage you feel like, this is something interesting I've learned, and you want to put a comment on that, you're welcome to do so. So moving on to the workplace, I mean, we're happy to take any post-its that you want to put in with your comments, and we'll go through the comments. But whilst you're thinking about how has the awareness of the Black presence evolved in the workplace, I'm going to pose that question to Ansel first and open the floor. So Ansel, your views, please.
Certainly, and I would really welcome people's contributions, because otherwise you're going to sit there listening to me for the whole hour, and that's not the purpose of these things. Yes, but we've looked at our educational experience in terms of what we learned at school and education and university. Now looking at the workplace, and I think basically one of the key things is that our entrepreneurial sectors and our workplace are key in terms of the development of society. And I think it's very, very important. One of the things I have noticed over the last few weeks was a proliferation of a significant sea change in the public presence of Black people. If you look on television now, almost every advert has some kind of Black individual or some kind of multiracial family, Black and white or Asian and white. And every aspect of the extent to which Black History Month is given its prominence. I mean, it starts with Meghan and Harry actually welcoming the start of Black History Month, unparalleled, unprecedented to have that kind of engagement. And when we established Black History Month in London, to be honest with you, I never ever think we have reached this stage. So the opportunity for businesses and the opportunity for the workplace to embrace diversity, to embrace that historical Black presence is important, because it makes sense. It makes business sense, so that anti-racism, anti-discrimination makes business sense. All the data, all the research shows that. There's a Corn Ferry, which is a consultancy. That consultancy found that companies that invest in positive social outcomes, so-called B corporations, increase their sales by 4 times over their competitors. So it is shown there, the black pound matters, and therefore it's integral to how we develop. In Manchester University showed that BAME will be a majority in our society, and are already majorities in our society in Leicester, in Luton, and Slough. And by 2061, Britain's population of Black and minority ethnic communities will reach 30%. Just think of that, a significant increase in terms of what our companies, what our workforces will be like, what kind of workforce we will have. And in addition to that, it's not only that, but it is a law. You are required under the Equalities Act to be diverse. You have a public duty to do so. And whether or not we use or point to diversity officers, or whether we give a commitment by having a policy, it's important that integral to the management and the governance of the company is equality. And my personal beef about that is not putting it into HR. Yes, HR is important, but having it at the central aspect of the governance and management, key. Okay, so the appeal is very important in terms of reaching out to that demographic, because with that demographic, you increase your profits.
Thank you so much for this answer. We're seeing some fantastic comments coming through as well. We've seen people are writing about, people are more open to talk about race. People are more proud to be Black at work. We've got some really more diverse leaders. It's a really interesting point there, using the term Black British rather than BAME. Ansel, I just wanted to pose this question to you. BAME is, it's used as a bucket term by many employers for our Black, Asian, and minority ethnic colleagues. What are your views about this term and, the use of this term and how that's evolved over the years?
I think I'm old enough to see a long history of how we define ourselves, and over the years, how that definition has changed. When I came to London, we were colored. We were colored people. And then that changed and changed as a result of our political activism to the concept of Black, which is an assertive, aggressive assertion of identity different from the dynamics and the aesthetics of color. And we tried to move on that. And then with growing activism, that started to change. And we introduced the concept of ethnic minorities. And there was a big debate over whether it should be ethnic minorities or minorities ethnic. It might seem very facetious to some of you today, but we spent a lot of time agonizing over those terms. I was the head of the Greater London Council Ethnic Minorities Unit, and we agonized over that. People criticized us with saying we are not a minority. It should be minority ethnic. And that developed. So the concept of BAME also created, and first of all, it was Black, Asian, and minority ethnic. And I know some aspects of that has been changed to Black and minority ethnic. So the A was either Asian or and that was interchangeable how people use that. I accept that it's a blanket term, and we find very good opportunities because politically it is what drives us. For example, in my early days, I was one of the people who promoted the concept or the definition of an Afro-Saxon to define us. And I use that terms in many, many instances in my own writings, because we wanted to somehow establish a notion of belonging to Britain, but also linking to the history of Britain. And turning Anglo-Saxon into Afro-Saxon was one kind of opportunity. So we are going through processes by which we identify ourselves, and you as the current generation, you as the people who would carry forward that struggle, you will make that definition, and you will make that definition relevant to what you are. So dinosaurs like myself needs to step back and allow you to take the baton.
Thank you for that. Really insightful. I do want to read some of the comments here as well, but I think there's some people having technical issues joining Miro board, and I wanted to open, if someone wants to raise their hand and they're struggling to get in, you can either use the chat or you can just unmute yourself and speak to us as well.
I was just going to say as well, Fatima, so we've had a pink question dropped in on the board. So I can just read that out for you both. So do we fear people not of colour may feel excluded in the celebration of Black History Month? How do we get them involved?
Can I just speak for myself? I'm included here because I want to learn about Black history, and I think it's thankfully, I mean, I've seen a comment here that says thanks to Black History Month, the presence is improving. I probably wouldn't have participated in a Black History Month event in previous years, but I'm, really actively and passionately involved in learning as much as I can about Black history. And
yeah,
so,
I'd just like
what
to
are your thoughts?
sorry, go on.
Sorry, Simran. Go ahead. Go, Simran.
I was just going to say, so I've heard comments like this a few times, and like I come from a South Asian heritage background, and one thing I've noticed is that it's not like one community's experience is so separate from the others, and I think they interlink so much, and I think there's so many similarities. I think just looking at the colour spectrum and that aspect as the determiner of whether it excludes you from that particular event, I don't think it necessarily always does. And one thing we've, especially with our theme this year, is really bring this inclusion aspect by saying like Black history isn't just Black history, it is everyone's history, and it really feeds into everyone's history. So in terms of getting involved, I think people being more inquisitive and being open, I think once you open that discussion, that's when people start to realise that actually it touches their history as well, much more than they think.
And I think that's the message, Simran, the extent to which it's not an exclusion or exclusivity, it's inclusive. And therefore, the concept is that we are one. We are one as a nation, but we are made of multiple ethnicities. As a matter of fact, recent census figures are showing that the growth of multi-identities, people of mixed heritage, are significantly high. So within a matter of time, we will reach this stage where we will have quite a majority, and people will find new ways of defining themselves, whether they're Black, whether they're mixed race, whether they're half caste, and so on. So all of those phrases have been part of our historical journey. And what it is here is that we are learning of one demographic that includes all of us, because it impacts on all of us, whether we're Black, we're white, we're Scottish, we're Welsh, or whatever. So the history is an inclusion of the totality of the Black presence and the national presence of everybody in the community.
Thank you, Ansel. I do want to read this comment out where we talk about the importance of employee networks, employee groups such as Culture Fusion. So somebody has written, with the support of employee groups such as Culture Fusion within Network Rail, important discussions on race, gender, biases, backgrounds, history, and experiences are being shared and highlighted. More work is required for senior leaders to be representative of the community. So Ansel, a quick view from you about what can senior leaders do specifically within the workplace to promote diversity and the Black experience?
I feel we all need, all of us, whether we're senior leaders or the major workforce, to have a complete understanding of what it is to live in a multiracial, multicultural society, the extent to which elements of that society are not external, are not other. So the concept of otherness must be eradicated. We are part and parcel, and we are also inclusive. And everybody at every part of the governance of that organization or that company need to embrace that. The embrace can come through policies and position papers. The embrace can become a personal commitment and understanding, so that all working practices are embedded in the concept of appreciating and understanding diversity and difference, so that we have within our organization, whether you record and reward excellence, or record and reward competency and promotions, we must have in a place the sense that that journey through the organization is not littered by obstacles. And where there are obstacles, that each and every one of us, whatever our status, have a responsibility to begin to challenge and undermine that. So it's not just HR, It's also the trustees, it's also the company and managing directors, and of course also outside your customers to help you to change as well. So it's a kind of wrong diversity. And the only justification for that is that it makes commercial sense. You will be not putting your company at risk by doing that. Just look at what happened to Nike. I'm sure everybody is aware of that. When they brought out the Air Jordan, it was fantastic. Nike was on its knees. If it was not for Air Jordan, they would not have survived as a company. And recently, the guy the football guy who went on his knees is Colin Kaepernick. Yeah, Nike produced a T-shirt. They call, I think American call it a jersey of him, and within 1 minute of its being proposed and put onto the website, it sold out. So the opportunity to reflect that diversity, because there were a lot of people who think that Nike was getting into politics, but it was a genuine response to the drive towards making our workforce diverse, and the economic benefits, the entrepreneurial benefits are there for everyone to see.
I think we should really, we would like to listen. I know that there's a lot of people struggling with technical issues. Ansel, thank you for all your insight that you're giving us, both in education for schooling and the workplace. Would anyone from our attendees like to speak and share their comments, please?
Hello.
You can come off mute.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes. Yeah,
Yes,
we can
we
hear
can.
you.
Okay. So I'll just introduce myself and answer the question. So Ansel, similar to yourself, I have a relatively mixed background in that my parents, well, my father and my siblings are from Trinidad. So picking that up, my mother's from St. Vincent. I was born in London, and my wife is West African. So very mixed there.
Yeah.
But I have a question, and it's a simple question. I'm in favour of Black History Month, and in fact, I'm in favour of Black history being taught. It shouldn't be a monthly thing. I had absolutely no Black history when I was at school. In fact, at school, it was a bit of a battle. A lot of people felt we were not only in a hostile environment, we were, in fact, behind enemy lines. But that's my sort of introduction. But my question is about Black History Month. There seems to be a real focus on, I'm going to say, the impact of Black as a result of colonization and slavery. However, if you look back further, there is a lot of interesting Black history. Things like the Kush Empire, Benin, famous for their bronze statues, the great city, Great Zimbabwe. There's a lot of history that predates the, I'm going to say, the sort of slavery and colonial impact. Isn't it important to have that sort of studies or discussion also involved in Black history, because Black history is a lot richer than the impact of Europeans on Africa?
I think the word there is richer. The richness of anybody's history, any country's history, goes beyond just mere wars, or goes beyond dates. Because again, my educational experience of learning about history per se is about a date and some kind of big thing. And it's a question of then to what extent we have that breadth and that historical context of the history or of the event. So a situation like what is called the Black Hole of Calcutta in India is seen very much from a British perspective. But when you take it from an Asian perspective, it's probably the first war of Indian independence, of the resistance of Indian people to the British presence. But the British would teach you and taught me that in history as the Black Hole of Calcutta. And I remember that very clearly. So I need to get that out of my system. So what we are trying to do is, you're quite right, to look at the whole breadth of history right across, to understand there are history prior to the Windrush, prior to the slave trade and the triangular trade. And most important, not see ourselves as a community as victims. We are not victims. We are the perpetrators of our own destiny and our own recognition of where we stand. So you're right, people like Septimus Severus, who was one of the African Roman emperors that brought into the United Kingdom, who encamped near Hadrian's Wall, and who was a very important historical personages. So people like the Black Tudor trumpeter, all of these individuals were there, part and parcel. And more modern times, to begin to understand the diversity of our society, we accept Sam Mendes as an important film director of Bond, but Sam Mendes is a Trinidadian of Trinidadian birth. So it's historical links with that is important. So begin to understand when we have this idea of history, is not just unique just to Africa or whatever it is, but it's right across the board. And there are individuals like you and I of multiple heritages that also have that multiplicity of experiences to draw on.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you.
May I speak?
Yeah.
Please do.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Ansel. My name is Sounda Narayan. We're talking about learning at school, and I probably come from a generation closer to yourself than most people. I went to school in the early 70s. Growing up in India, I think we had a slightly American slant to it. The sort of black people I've read about at school, we taught about, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, and also Booker T. Washington. I don't know whether those are names that ring a bell. Yes.
And that's perhaps reflective of your very colonial education. Oh, sorry, but I interrupted you.
Sure. I had, within quotes, English education, yes, growing up in India. All of us born here, I went back to India at a very young age, and I grew up there. And a couple of other things. I mean, talking about, of course, I can talk till the cows come home about India and Indian history. But I'm aware that, for example, mankind started in the caves of the Cape Province in South Africa. That's where humans evolved initially, Homo sapiens. Going that far back in human history, in Africa, in South Africa, in the Cape. And also, I think about 1,000 years ago, I'm aware that the city of Timbuktu was a center of great learning and scholarship. So I just thought it worth mentioning, and which I think probably has been forgotten over time.
And I think it's that forgotten history, or whether it's just been airbrushed out of it, or is not given prominence. I don't know if people deliberately do that, but it's that absence of things that are part of our ancestral heritage that needs to be given some prominence and to be verified. And I think it is also very important that facts, information needs to be verified. So the opportunity for research to be conducted to make that whatever we are saying rooted in factual information. And I think in terms of that ancestral timeline that exists, we need to begin to bring all of that back into our curriculum to make it an essential part of our curriculum. And again, not necessarily something like topic or theme orientated like slavery and so on, without the concept of what goes behind that and what is linked to that. I think that has to be an important way forward.
I do think one other thing which really impressed me in modern times was in 1984 when Nelson Mandela became president of South Africa. He started with the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. He said, let us understand what the truth was under apartheid, and then let us reconcile, draw a line, and then move forward. I think that has prevented bloodshed. And I think that's probably the way forward for people with a lot of mixed and troubled past. Truth and reconciliation. I thought that was a great idea from them.
Thank you.
I'm conscious that we are really enjoying the engaging conversation on the workplace and history and education, and I think we could spend a much longer time on this board. But I think we should move on to the next board, which is really talking about past, present, and future. So over to you, Simran, to take us through the board.
Thank you. Perfect, thank you. Just want to say thanks for everybody for partaking in those discussions. What we wanted to do to just round off the day was kind of reflect on, how we were made aware of Black history in the past, how we're made aware now, and what we should do moving forward. So I'll just bring everybody to me on the board now, and again, if you can all drop your comments in, that would be amazing, and do come off mute to join in the discussion as well. But sort of handing over to you, Ansel, like, how have you seen the evolution of the teaching of Black history and how people have been made aware of it, I suppose?
I think what was a interesting thing for me recently is to see the level of interest in terms of the public exposure and the branding of issues around Black and minority ethnic communities in every aspect of our society, on the television, on the radio, and everywhere. Obviously, it's all done within the context of a severe pandemic that we are all experiencing. But perhaps because we were caught indoors and had to look at our television, it was that a good opportunity. So I'm very pleased that younger generations, younger people are picking up that, and that a focus is on that. And each and every one of us has a personal responsibility to be the ambassador for diversity, the ambassador for change. Change will only come as a result of the engagement and the intervention of an individual within the workforce, within the family, and to be able to be that person that says this got to stop or this ought to happen. So the activism, the engagement, the involvement of each individual, either in the workforce or in the community or in the society, now is central to that change.
And how do you see we could best move forward? I appreciate you talked about the individuality element comes in and being far more proactive with it. But in terms of if there was one thing we could all take away today, I know it's a big question answer, but how would you pose that to somebody in terms of moving forward so that they could be, making an impact?
I think one of the most important things is let's try to create alliances, because each and every one of us, wherever we are, need to perhaps link up with people of like-minded things to be able to collectively, together, initiate some kind of change or some sort of action. Whether it's a question of saying, let us look at some of the common features of our experiences within your community or within that specific community, and then promote that. So that is a question of then saying, for example, you may not have heard of this particular individual who has made quite a seminal contribution to the British society. Let's take that forward, because that hasn't happened. So for me, example, in terms of that, one of the things I found really annoying is that a close colleague of mine and a very seminal individual, Dame Jocelyn Barrow, died during the pandemic. She had a seminal role on the BBC, one of the first Black members of the board of the BBC. She had roles in relation to developing anti-racism. And there's no recognition, even by the BBC, of that happened. And I know Naga Manchetta did actually raise that issue with the BBC. But for me, I would want to promote that in the way that I did before she died. I organized an event at South Africa House to celebrate her 90th birthday and invite everybody to hear, and then to begin to focus on her experiences and her achievements, so that all knew about it. And we published a booklet on that. So that is one little action that somebody can do from within each individual community, coming together to promote an understanding, a public awareness of change, and also a successful change, not just as a victim of some society or racism or whatever.
It's really interesting to see, Ansel, the sort of themes that we're getting from each of the past, present, and future boards. And I can see a fair bit of social media playing a role in the present piece. And in the past piece, I can see people hearing about from their parents, stories about their documentaries they're saying can often be too painful, and learning about Black history from dramas rather than documentaries, family, friends, and school. So it's really interesting to see. So it feels like social media plays a very key role in promoting the Black experience.
Hi everyone. It's Kulveer Ranger here, Ansel. Mine's Kulveer. I'm the executive sponsor at Atos for the Together Network. So I want to say two things. Firstly, thank you so much for coming on this symposium with you. I'm hugely a fan of yours, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But also I want to thank both Network Rail and their team, and the Together Network team for putting this together. You know, it's about sharing experiences and hearing from you and all your experiences. It's really moving, it's informative, and I can't tell you how excited I am. And I'll tell you why, because I'm a child, well, I was born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s and 90s. So I was shaped by things like going to Notting Hill Carnival. I'm a Londoner, born and bred. And also, I worked for the Mayor of London. I spent a number of years working for a man called Boris Johnson when he was mayor. And we used to call this the greatest city on earth. And we didn't call it the greatest city just because we had all the museums and the galleries and, you know, the events and the Olympics and everything else. But it was the multitude of cultures living together in our city in peace and celebrating, which really worked. But I also still remember the recent history. And I just wanted to touch on this with you because you chaired Notting Hill Carnival and the delivery of that amazing event. And I used to go through the years where maybe it was more challenging. It was seen as something that, you know, every community seemed to be segregated at that point. You know, I'm a Sikh, I wear a turban, and I'd go to the Melas in either East London or West London. Carnival was for the Afro-Caribbean community, it was felt, but I wanted to go there. So I was really keen to understand, how did you go through those years when it was probably a bit harder than it has been in recent time? Facing those challenges of delivering Carnival, which has become such an iconic event for all Londoners, not just from the Afro-Caribbean community.
The event itself was very much an example of how that migrant community from Trinidad began to recreate and refashion an event that they knew in their history in London. The first difficulty we had is Carnival is a pre-Lenten festival. So it happens in February and March. And as you know, February and March in London is not the best time, winter-wise, to have a carnival event on the road. So that was the first major difficulty, the extent to which we do that. And in a sense, you can understand the osmosis and the process by which it became integral, because it happened instinctively as a result of somebody deciding at a garden party, a garden fete, that this was the most boring thing to sit behind a fence playing music on the steel band to people to dance. And like the Pied Piper of Hamelin, he opened the gate and went out onto the road and took the people with him. And that simple little act created a precedent, because somebody said, my God, this is very good. Let's do it next year. And what happened is that the local authorities failed to appreciate what was happening. So it grew and grew and grew until they couldn't make any changes to it at all, to the extent that the event is the only unregulated event in this country, so that nobody can stop it. Nobody is responsible for it, and it just happened as a result. So it's trying to maintain the opportunity to raise money through corporate sponsors, and also to retain the incorporated status, because we couldn't afford to pay for the police to help it. We couldn't afford to pay for the cleaning up by the local authority. So we had to find a way of saying, yes, we want this event, but we don't want responsibility. So that's also another key factor. But it developed, and importantly, because it was within London, it attracted a lot of other communities. So its Afro-Caribbean focus began to change. And I believe it has now become a quintessentially British event that incorporates all our communities in it. So it becomes a genuinely British carnival.
Fantastic, and thank you so much for that and for taking part today.
Okay.
I'm just thinking that we are conscious of time, so we do want to hear from other people. We've heard a lot about how, you know, the role that we as individuals need to play, whether it's in the workplace or whether it is to educate the people around you or our families and friends. Please do, if you get a chance, to have a look at the board at the bottom of this page as well, which is about, you know, what action you will take next and take this a bit further. Would anyone else like to speak and provide any comments?
I just wanted to jump in here. Sharon Salmon here. I'm the chair for Culture Fusion Network, and I just absolutely really enjoying today's event, and it's always a pleasure to listen to Ansel. It makes me realise just how much I don't actually know about history, and it really does inspire me to go and read more about it. So I wanted to just really thank you for the really engaging conversations that we've been having. And, you know, call to action. You know, we have been talking a lot about diversity, about how we're going to make change. But it's very promising that all those people on the call today, that in some way they want change, and that's why they've joined today. So I want to, again, congratulate Ansel Wong for his CBE, and thank you, ladies, for, you know, such a wonderful event. So over to our panelists. Thank you. Bye.
Simran, I've just been told, Sharon, thank you so much. And it's great to hear from both the head of the Together Network and Culture Fusion as well, just to get their insight into how they found the session. And Ansel is an absolute inspiration. I mean, this is our second session that we've ran with him, and we are absolutely loving the engagement from everybody. Whatever people have written on here, obviously it's completely anonymous, but we will use that as you know, input and feedback back to our networks to say this is what people have said. So thank you so much for all your input. Simran, Sonia has just pointed out that there's a couple of questions in the chat that we should be reading out as well.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to see.
Can you see those questions?
Unfortunately, I can't. Sonia, would you mind coming off mute?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, everybody. It's Sonia here from the Cultural Fusion Network. I saw an interesting comment from Colin. Hi, all. Ansel, listening to you is interesting and fascinating. As a 61-year-old white British male, I've witnessed a huge number of changes in our society, and of course want to see these positive changes continue. Sorry, my computer's going nuts, hold on. We need to remember that what was acceptable 40, 50 years ago are clearly wrong today. And this, and this evolution and revolution will continue. We must push together as we build a better and continuously more inclusive and social, inclusive and diverse society. So that's great. That's great hearing some of the members from both our companies, you know, make such insightful comments.
I think the message there is pushing together. This is where it has to happen. I use the concept of the palace gates, and I say to people, well, I am opening the palace gates from inside. As you progress within the institution and you get to managerial position, your role is to open those gates and to pull others through it. And that is why I use this concept of my role as a senior person is to open those palace gates from the inside.
And you do so very well, Ansel. We thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely. I cannot echo Sonia's comments there. Absolutely. We've had an amazing event today and lots of engagement. Unfortunate that not everyone who's attending the session was able to join, Myro. Apologies for that. We don't know what happened there. But thank you so much for all your input, everybody.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Fatima. We are just coming up to time as well, sadly. I could talk to you all day, Ansel. We've had some amazing discussions, especially on these last couple of activities. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everybody who's been a part of the call and has dropped in comments. But also I want to say a big thank you to the team who supported as well, from Network Rail and all of those from Atos. Big shout out to Deloitte as well for all of your support. And last but by no means least, of course, a huge and a heartfelt thank you to Ansel. Getting to know you over the last couple of weeks and the last couple of months has been honestly incredible. I learned so much from you every time we speak, and just dedicating the time to share with us today and bringing this event to life for us. We have put our emails on the board for everyone. Should you have any follow-up comments or any feedback for us, we would love for you to share. So just again, thank you so much and congratulations again, Ansel.
Well, my personal thanks to the members of the team. I too learned a lot as a result of it, and I'm hopeful with individuals like yourselves in these organizations. I'm really hopeful for the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Please be safe, take care, and dear audience, kindly remind that we will share the link to the recording with you to replay it and to have it in our memories. Have a very, very good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.